Hello, and welcome to Stories from India, a podcast where we talk about myths, legends, and folk tales from India. I am your host, Narad Muni, and I'm a mythological character myself. I have the gift of eternal life and knowledge of the past, the present, and the future. By profession, I'm a traveling musician and a storyteller. So, the way I'm doing my job is by podcast. In this episode, we are back into the Ramayana. It's been a few weeks since we last covered the Ramayana. It will be helpful if you were to hear previous Ramayana episodes, but like most other episodes on this show, I'll try and make this one standalone as well. So here is a summary of the story so far. Ram, the crown prince of Ayodhya, had to give up his title to his half brother Bharat when Bharat's mom cashed in on a couple of promises from King Dashrath. As an insurance policy against Bharat giving the kingdom back to Ram, she also exiled Ram from Ayodhya for 14 years. Ram did not go alone. He was accompanied by his wife Sita and his brother Lakshman. Bharat was not a willing party in this conspiracy. He was on vacation, and when he returned, he found Dasharath was no more, and he himself, instead of Ram, was the next king. What was worse, when he found Ram in the forest, Ram flat out refused to return to Ayodhya with him. He had made a promise and he was going to keep it. So Ram, Lakshman, and Sita stayed back. In the Dandak forest, they had earned a bit of a reputation as crime fighters, eliminating baddies here and there. They ran into Shurpanakha, a Rakshasi who tried to go out with Ram. When Ram politely pointed out that he was married to Sita, Shurpanakha even offered to solve that problem by eating Sita. Luckily, Lakshman was able to prevent that, but in a grisly way. He chopped off her ears and nose in the process. She went away but complained that there would be a sequel to this, featuring her brothers and their armies. And so, here we are. We'll continue the story from this point, but do check out the links in the show notes if you'd like to hear more Ramayana episodes. Khar, the governor of the Dandak forest, was discussing administrative matters with his twin brother, Dushan. They were tallying the number of rishis that they had disturbed. But they lost count when there was a commotion outside. A distraught Shurpanakha stormed in. "How dare you walk in here without an appointment?" Dushan addressed her, not recognizing his own sister. Khar was a little bit more perceptive. "Why, it's Shurpanakha. Hey Shurpi, have you had a makeover?" "It suits you," chimed in Dushan. "It's an improvement, I think. Ears are pointless, since we don't need face masks, and glasses have not been invented yet. And what's the point of having a nose anyway? All one can do is to scratch it, or pick it, or. And he would have gone on, except at this point, Shurpanakha threw a vase at him. Nimbly, Dushan dodged the vase. Not for nothing was he a military commander. Shurpi, what's going on here? Asked Khar, concerned. She explained everything that had happened to her, but with several modifications. So there I was, minding my own business on my evening run, when I ran into a couple of ordinary wanderers from Ayodhya and an ugly looking lady. All out of nowhere, the two guys started making fun of me. I told them that my brothers, Khar and Dushan, are the big boys around here, and they'd better not mess with me or with them. But the lady, she just laughed and called you some dirty names. What dirty names? Asked Khar and Dushan, appalled. This was their territory. It wouldn't do to have ordinary people show disrespect. I refuse to repeat it out of decency, said Shurpanakha. But in reality, she just couldn't think of bad enough names. Just let her brothers imagine the worst. That would spur them into action. Khar had heard enough. He commanded 14 of his toughest warriors to go crush these wanderers. And Sita, crush her too, added Shurpanakha. 14 on 3 should not be a problem, thought Khar. Success was practically guaranteed. Unless these Ayodhya people turned out to be like Rambo, maybe. He had heard of Ayodhya, of course. He knew the princes there were pretty powerful. But from Shurpi's description, these guys were just wanderers. They couldn't be princes. He tuned in his radio to listen to that operation going down. Shurpanakha and Dushan crowded around the radio with him. The 14 warriors had divided themselves into two teams and were communicating instructions to each other. Team Alpha calling Team Bravo. We are on the left flank. Target in sight. Confirm position. Over. The reply came pretty quickly. Team Bravo received communication. We are on the right flank. Proceed with caution, Team Alpha. The two guys are sitting around chatting. No weapons in sight. But the lady has knitting needles that look sharp. Over. Acknowledge, Team Bravo. Get ready to launch a synchronized attack from the right. Alpha proceeding in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There was a rushing noise, as if people were suddenly sprinting forward, which is exactly what was happening. After a moment or two, there was screaming, and then nothing. Dead silence for a whole couple of minutes. They made quick work of the lot, Dushan said. Now to just wait for the confirmation. But then a voice came over the radio that chilled them all to the bone. 14 name tags in all. Here, add them to your collection, Lakshman, Ram said. Also, let's take out the batteries from all those walkie-talkies. We can use them for something else. 14 of their best warriors. Destroyed without even much of a fight. And by all reports, Ram and Lakshman didn't even seem to have their weapons on them. Grimly, Kar ordered his armies to prepare for the battle of their lives. And he began putting on his own battle armor. He was going to enter the battlefield himself. And so was Dushan. Ram and Lakshman had escalated this. And now, the response needed to be proportional. Shurpanakha began sensing that maybe she should move on to plan B. I'm actually thinking of going back to Lanka. I had a few guys, she said to her brothers. I'd better go see to these injuries. Her brothers nodded grimly and did not say anything. Soon, Khar and Dushan and 14,000 soldiers marched towards the Dandak forest. Meanwhile, Shurpanakha took the express route back to Lanka. Let's cut over to Panchavati meanwhile. Ram, Lakshman, and Sita were talking. You can't deny that it's an incredible coincidence, Lakshman said. What are the odds that 4 of the 14 soldiers had the same first name? I'm not denying that it's a coincidence, replied Ram. I'm just saying it's not all that incredible. All it takes is one person to do something heroic, and then everyone wants to name their kids after him or her. I bet a few millennia from now, there will be hundreds and thousands of Rams, Lakshmans, and Sitas. But not Kaikais, not Mantra, not Khar, not Dushan, and certainly not Shurpanakha or Ravan, replied Sita. At least, I hope so. Shh, said Ram. No spoilers, please. People listening to this podcast may not know what happens to all those characters in the end. He would have continued, but just then, he saw Lakshman and stopped. Lakshman had suddenly become alert. I hear it too, said Ram. They rushed out of their home to see the column of dust rising on the horizon. Just like it did when Bharat was visiting with his army, said Lakshman. No, this is different, replied Ram. That one was an army of 15,000 soldiers, 500 elephants, and 1,000 horses. This feels different. This column of dust feels like an army of 14,000 soldiers and some chariots, but no elephants. This is probably Khar and Dushan's army. 14,000 soldiers, repeated Lakshman. This is going to be a bother. Yup, said Ram. This will take me a few hours to work through. Why you? Asked Lakshman. I can handle them. No, no, said Ram. It's my turn. You took care of the leaky roof. We had agreed then that the next chore is on me. Now take Sita and go find a spot somewhere to hide, just in case they try to attack the house. Lakshman and Sita rushed off. They found a cave where they took shelter. Ram, meanwhile, had summoned his magic arsenal of weapons. He had received this from Vishwamitra back in episode 16, 16 Flags. He began looking through the catalogue that came with it, looking for a suitable astra or projectile. He found one finally, and he found it in the nick of time too. As 14,000 Rakshas descended on him, Ram took his bow and fired the Gandharv Astra. Instantly, 14,000 anti-Rakshas sprang from nowhere. These anti-Rakshasas challenged the regular Rakshasas. And just as you may remember from physics, when matter and antimatter collide, they get annihilated. So that's exactly what happened. And instantly, as each Rakshas came to its anti-Rakshas counterpart, 14,000 Rakshasas and 14,000 anti-Rakshasas disappeared. Now, as a byproduct of matter and antimatter colliding, yes, there was some energy, but not enough to make much of a difference. Most people just saw it as a bright flash of light. Khar and Dushan were shocked. This was insane. Their entire army had disappeared right before their eyes. It seemed that Khar and Dushan were the only survivors on the Rakshasa's side. But there was one other person too. That was Akampana. Akampana was an uncle of Ravan who happened to be in Khar's army. Just as it happened, he had strayed away from the rest of the army temporarily, which was lucky for him. But it was to have a terrible effect, as we will see later. Ram, meanwhile, was looking at the catalogue again, at the Gandharva Astra section. He noticed the asterisk this time. It said, only works on foot soldiers, does not affect commanders, and doesn't affect adversaries at long distances. Well, that explained why there hadn't been an anti-Khar and an anti-Dushan. Never mind, thought Ram. He could use other weapons on Khar and Dushan. The Rakshas brothers, meanwhile, were firing arrows at Ram, which Ram casually flicked away with his own arrows. Dushan then picked up a magic spear. It seemed to block everything. Ram kept firing arrow after arrow, but the spear seemed to intercept everything. A little bit like Vashishta's staff, back from episode 15, Rishi versus Rishi, Uncivil War. Ram had to try a change of tactic. Instead of aiming every arrow at the spear, he aimed for Dushan's hand. And that made all the difference. As Ram suspected, the magic of the spear was only effective if Dushan was holding it. So once Ram had pinned Dushan's hands with a stream of arrows, Dushan had to drop the spear. And then Ram had no trouble in finishing off the Rakshas. That enraged Khar, who howled in anger. when he saw his twin brother's lifeless body. He took out a club. This was his trump card. It was a special magic club that was on fire, both literally and figuratively. Khar flung it at Ram. Ram dodged it, barely. The club went on and hit a tree that was behind Ram. Instantly, the tree was incinerated. What's more, the club returned back to Khar's hand magically, just like Thor's hammer, if you have seen the Marvel Avengers movies. Ram had to think for a minute, but then he decided to try the Agni Astra. Agni is the god of fire. So Ram was going to fight fire with fire. While his previous ordinary arrows had sizzled out when they came into contact with the club, the Agni Astra was fire resistant. Ram took careful aim, just as Khar launched the club at Ram. Ram's Astra shot out of his bow, just as the club was almost on him. Thankfully, it worked. The Agni Astra shattered the club to pieces. I guess Khar should have gotten a few extra ones as backup, because now he was completely out of any magic options. He used an ordinary bow and a set of ordinary arrows and fired them rapidly at Ram. Ram fired back. Though they both wounded each other in the beginning, in the end, Khar was no match for Ram. One of Ram's arrows found its mark. And just like that, suddenly the Dandak forest was without a governor. Akampana was watching from a distance. He had managed to avoid becoming a victim of the Gandharvastra, just because he happened to be at a bit of a distance. And after that, he had been far too scared to enter the battlefield. He sneaked off quickly before Ram could spot him. He headed straight for Lanka. And he had an idea in his head. What gave him the idea was the way Ram had had Sita escorted away from the scene for her protection. Akampana had discovered where Ram could be hurt the most. Lakshman and Sita returned from the cave. "Not bad, bro," said Lakshman. "I was timing you. That fight was about 28 minutes long. So you averaged about 500 soldiers a minute. You might have set a new record." "It was a lot less than 28 minutes, replied Ram. "It was all the Gandharvastra. Frankly, I think I spent more time fighting Khar and Dushan." He had a bit of concern on his face. "If the Gandharv Astra is so powerful, why don't you seem happy about it?" asked Sita. "That," replied Ram, "is because I don't have any more Gandharv Astras. And I'm positive that for what is going to come next, those could be really, really handy." "Never mind," said Lakshman. "I'm starved. Better get some food." Who wants to eat idli and vadas? Ram, you took care of Kar and Dushan. I'm going to order lunch for us and we are even, okay? Over in Lanka, Shurpanakha and Akampana were both having a conversation with Ravan. That would decide the rest of the Ramayana. But we'll come to that in a future episode. To quote Ram, no spoilers. A couple of notes on the show. 14 is certainly a special number in the Ramayana. It keeps coming up. 14 years of exile, 14 warriors in the first wave, 14,000 in the second wave. Let me assure you that it's just a coincidence. It was 14 years of exile because of the laws. The law stated that if a king is absent from the kingdom for 14 years, they lose their right to the throne. So, when Kaikai exiled Ram for 14 years, it was just to ensure that when he came back, he could not claim the throne legally. But we'll see later how that problem was overcome. I've linked previous episodes in the show notes. There are 9 of them. We have also covered 3 episodes that are not part of the main storyline, but feature some central Ramayana characters. That's all I have for this week. In the next episode, we'll cover a folktale from the southern Indian state of Karnataka. It's about a couple of scholars who wander into a village where the people behave very illogically. It gets them into a lot of trouble, but they are able to weasel out of that situation. That's all I have for now. If you have comments or suggestions, or if there are particular stories you would like to hear, please do let me know by leaving a comment or a review on the site sfipodcast.com or tweet at sfipodcast. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook. Be sure to subscribe to the show to get notified automatically of new episodes. Thanks to all of you listeners for your continued support and your feedback. The music is from purpleplanet.com. That's purple-planet.com. I'll see you next week.